I'm
Showtime.
thirsty.
Think we're
Okay.
live. Here we are. Episode 7 of the Justin and
Caitlin show.
man, we are on it today. I feel this.
It's our nap.
Yeah. I slept till noon and Caitlin just got up from a 2-hour nap.
1.5 hours. It was wonderful.
So we got some rest, so I might be a little bit overly excited today. We'll see what happens.
I mean, we are dealing with anger, so there's lots of emotions there.
Hey, that's true. Today is the last chapter we're going to be going through in Wayne Dyer's book, Your Erroneous Zones. It's called Farewell to Anger. I like that every time that's like your thing.
I know, it's like...
But this is going to be a time where we touch on some of what he goes through, but this is really going to be about more our journey through anger, what we've seen both personally, then as in the counselor chair, and then also I guess on the flip side being in the couch, so to speak. And it's just to remember this book has some really awesome learning points. I do recommend people read it, but also keep in mind it was written in 1974-ish, so we're
somewhere around there,
50 years old, 50 plus. So some stuff might be a little antiquated, or there's new research. So keep that in mind. Bear that in mind. So yeah, let's just get this party started.
Let's do it. What's our first topic?
Can we get a drum roll? I like it. Oh, I hit the wrong button. I blew it.
Oh, well, you got like 4 more times to do it, so we'll do it.
Okay, cool.
Okay.
So Dyer's whole point, and this he makes some interesting points I didn't necessarily agree with, and Caitlin, I know you didn't necessarily connect with all of them either. But his whole point is, and his perspective and definition is, seeing anger as an immobilizing reaction experienced when any expectancy is not met. Yes. Meaning when others don't do what we thought they would, or they didn't do it the right way, then you get angry.
Which goes in line, though, with the rest of his book and his writings, where he's talking about not giving away your power to other people, where if that coworker does make that comment, not getting so angry that then the rest of your day is spent venting about the coworker or focusing on that. So I get where he's coming from when he's saying the immobilization part isn't beneficial for you. But I think he wraps up anger in a very simple definition, when anger has very many different facets, especially for us, one for ourselves, like what we've walked through with our own anger, and then watching clients walk through it. Their anger is much more complex than just something that immobilizes you.
Right on. Yeah, there's healthy expressions of anger. I think that's relevant now with the social injustice and the activists and just being angry. But again, you see some of the ways it manifests unhealthy, and then you see ways where people are taking action and making moves. And shout out to Andrea, going to Orlando Police Department Monday, and sitting in a meeting with 12 other officers and some other community people. And not that she would get angry or anything, but it's sometimes getting frustrated and annoyed enough causes us to step into and have proximity to issues that normally maybe we wouldn't.
Yeah.
And so that's, again, a healthy way where some anger or frustration has led to some action that's, hopefully that's really fruitful.
Yeah.
Man, so let's dive into this.
Let's do it. Well, I know you wrote this little topic here, so how about you start us off, and then I'll jump in.
This, I think, is a major point you get to in therapy, where I think at the beginning of therapy, or beginning-ish, there's this element where it's like, part of the grieving process you go through, whether it's childhood stuff or traumas and what have you, anger is a part of grieving. Get pissed off. You know what I mean? What happened wasn't cool.
Yep.
And there's this element where, again, the helpfulness is just an honest part of the process. Down the road in therapy, when you hit that middle therapy phase, and where things start becoming more about, well, what are we going to do a little different? What are some new behaviors we're going to develop? So it's no longer so much about the past. It's starting to really write that new story.
Yep.
This is a tough one to come up with. When we get frustrated and annoyed, it's understanding that anger is a learned reaction. I unfortunately had a front row seat for 23, 24 years of my dad exploding.
Mm-hmm.
And my mom would get fiery too. She just wasn't as frequent. And a lot of people in my family are explosive in that way, get really angry and loud and intense. It's just how it is. My brother is. It's to be straight up, I am, or I was too.
Yeah.
We'll talk later about our own stories, so I don't want to go too far. But I had some real gut check when Andrea and I were dating before we were ever engaged and married. It was, well, there's times she would do things that would annoy the crap out of me, and I'm like, well, I can sit here and get angry and piss, but that just follows suit with things I don't want to mimic, and I don't want to recycle.
Yep.
So how about I sit here and embrace the feelings and see where this takes us? And that wasn't easy.
No, not at
Still
all.
not at times.
Mm-mm.
But it has definitely changed a lot of how conversations are with me, because I used to know in my back pocket that there was very few people in this world who could keep up with my intensity when I really let it rip.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to get to a point later in life realizing, well, that's not the healthiest way to maintain relationships.
Maybe not. No. Yeah.
But it is. It was a gut check. Listen, Justin, this is a learned reaction. You don't have to get pissed off at Andrea or whoever. I'm just using her because, it's a relational thing. You don't have to get pissed off at her.
Mm-hmm.
You can actually choose not to do that. Sit and have an adult conversation.
Yep.
You may not like what you hear. You may have to eat a slice or an entire pie of humble pie.
Yep, that happens.
But this is a much healthier approach than getting full of piss and vinegar.
Mm-hmm.
What do you got?
Well, are we jumping into like personal stories yet, or are we just okay? So not jumping into personal stories. So the way I started kind of engaging this with clients, and this is the way that it was also engaged with me, is we do a lot of the inner child work. So understanding there, without getting into the neuroscience with part of our brains being stuck there and all that fun stuff, there is a part of us that we do have an inner child. And many times when we have been hurt or when we're afraid of something, this anger erupts. And we discuss it as like the angry adolescent. It's almost like that teen that's trying to protect like his little brother or her little sister from being bullied.
Right.
When that angry teen gets involved to protect. So if we look at anger as a secondary emotion, what is really below that anger is usually hurt and fear. So when you're able to discuss it and you're like, okay, I'm really fired up about this person. I want to punch a hole in the wall or punch the person or go off. A variety of options here. What's really happening in that situation? How were you hurt? What got triggered? Or how are you now afraid? And I know talking to clients that do struggle with a more abusive side, whether it be that they're the ones doing the abusing or suffering from it, that fear is really there. Because for people that are taking their anger out on other people, many times as a child, they were really badly hurt.
Yep.
Very badly hurt. And this is, again, what they've learned. And so when you're able to get in touch with that fear that's there, it's harder. It's easier to stay with the anger on the surface and just say that this person frustrates you or pisses you off, whatever you want to say, versus really getting in touch with that fear and realizing that's the driving force.
Yeah.
But that's also a very childlike and vulnerable emotion, because it's easier and it's almost safer in a way to say that I'm pissed off at someone or I'm annoyed versus saying I'm actually really scared or I feel afraid or I'm really hurt by what just happened. That is that's much more vulnerable than saying I'm irritated or I'm angry. So that's where I've taken it with clients, and that's where I had to go myself, is what's really below the surface. Yes, we need to express the anger, and we'll get into that in just a second. But what's really going on below the surface with the hurt or the fear?
Mm.
And that'll take you right to the root of it. And then there's lots of tears. Then the grieving process actually starts, and then you can heal. It's great.
And one thing I've noticed, and it has happened to me too, but I've noticed too with couples, anger gets used as a way to avoid intimacy. When that intimacy feels threatening, because that affects our attachment stuff, which we'll get into in our next, as our show evolves here, but attachment stuff. But when that starts activating and intimacy becomes threatening, if I can get angry and cause a little scuffle with the wife or the husband or whatever your situation, then I don't have to engage it because now he or she's pissed at me and that's not going to happen.
Or if I know a hard conversation needs to happen, conveniently having a breakdown or getting angry right before the conversation happens. It's a way of avoiding it. Because again, if we go below it, the hurt or the fear is there. That's what you got to be in touch with.
And I'd imagine there's some people who are going to be listening, whether now or later. We get a lot of viewers later after the show, which is cool. They're like, dude, I don't explode on people. You know, well, this isn't just a show that's going to miss you.
Yeah, we got you. Don't worry.
Hey, we're equal opportunity here.
Yeah, we'll talk to both people. Don't worry.
You know, it's this element where a lot of people go around where they're either self-imploding or a lot of people will get very, it's whatever, I don't care. It's whatever, I don't care. And it's a lot of just pushing it off. And it's sad.
Too scared to even face it.
Exactly. And it's a sad part of either you were never allowed to express anger as a kid because it was dangerous to do so, or you got shut down even worse. Or you just never really learned how to do it. Like, I think anger is just an honest part of our human experience. And there's just this element where you've never been shown in a healthy way, whether that's your family or friends or whatever, how to express that. And it's interesting because that is a learned art as well. When you've come from nothing and you've shut it down because you've been, whether afraid or whatever the block is, it is a learned art of expressing it. Now, I bet people on the other side are like, oh, you just do it. You just blow up, you know.
It's for those people, again, so this ties into more my story, which I know we'll get into, but not expressing it and not communicating about it and thinking over here that I'm like, oh, you know, I don't have anger issues. I'm fine. You never see when I'm angry because I'm constantly imploding. But here's the problem, though. If you don't deal with the anger or you don't deal with the hurt or the fear below it, you will either explode, which means you harm other people, or you implode, which means you harm you. So either you hurt other people or you hurt yourself. And it's been proven that people that constantly implode and hold all of those emotions in,
you're going there.
I am going there. They die sooner. They have higher cancer rates. They have higher heart disease. They have higher strokes because their body is literally taking all of the pressure. It's taking all the stored emotions. It's taking all of the trauma, all of the pain, and it's holding it. And it cannot figure out how to get rid of it. And we do end up getting sick.
Yep.
A lot of autoimmune disorders have been linked to trauma that has been unresolved. And when that trauma gets resolved, things happen. And it's amazing. Like, again, exploding, we're not saying go around exploding, punching walls, doing things like that. I'm not saying, though, that imploding is any better because it does end up hurting you. But again, both are learned reactions. It's what you saw. Like, you learn, again, we're born with our biological DNA. So by the time you're 4 to 5 years old, you have your relational DNA. So if you think about the experiences up to 4 or 5 years old when you were a kid, those have helped determine how you relate to the world around you. So if you were shown during that time that expressing anger is not okay, and then that was reinforced throughout your childhood, you won't be able to express it today.
Think about it at school.
Yeah. School was a big one for me. Anger was never allowed to be expressed in our school. Disagreement.
You got detention. Yep. You have detention. Okay, that never worked.
And that's why you have detention.
And that's when I got suspended. No, okay. So this is a cool topic. And this is nice, and this is a fun part of having, male and female on our show here. It's cool to have both sides of this story. And, So how would you say anger is different in a female than a male? And you can talk to the societal stuff, some doubles, however you want to take this, but how do you feel anger comes about in females, gets expressed, and then how others take that in?
I mean, I think with both genders, it's very different, but you can also have both extremes. So there are women that get thrown off by the littlest thing and they do explode, they do become angry. You have women who are abusive. You have women who are traffickers. You have women who take out their anger on every single person around them.
Mm-hmm.
They're called a variety of words. And you can have women that are abusive. You can have women that are just angry and they let you know it and they're going off and they do not have control over what they say. You also have women who are very, very passive. And I think that was a very popular societal standard, especially 30 to 50 years ago, where women were much more passive.
Yep.
You were expected to just kind of go with it. And you found your friends to vent to. But besides that, you kind of just went with it. And that was the expectation. But I think we have to talk about both ends of the spectrum and everything in between, because now there is such a wide variety of how anger is expressed for women. But I don't think women or men have really been taught how to actually deal with the anger that's there and approach the hurt or the fear that's underneath it. We're just constantly reacting to this immeasurable pain that's inside of us. And some are reacting more to being more passive, like I was, versus being more explosive. And the explosive can look in a variety of ways.
How do you feel a woman who's angry and shows it gets perceived by society?
Not great.
Versus maybe a man.
I think men are allowed to be more aggressive. And that's a term that when you say the word aggressive, you more link it with a male.
Correct.
Versus when you say aggressive, it's not easily linked to females. And so even females who are learning or who have learned how to deal with their anger and how to express it in different ways. For instance, I fight in my spare time. Like I practice boxing and self-defense, Krav Maga, all that fun stuff. But it is a way of letting out, learning how to do this in a healthier way, learning how to protect myself. But there's definitely, the word aggression is much easier thrown around to men than it is women. It's an interesting, there's many different facets of it.
What would you say the double standard is?
I think men, and this is again coming from my point of view as a white woman.
That's why I'm asking it. Yeah.
It's not saying this is the only way of viewing it. What I have seen is that men have been allowed to express their anger more outwardly. In my life, I was expected to more be internal with it through different relationships that I had. But the males in my life were much more able to express it outwardly. Usually it was very destructive as well, but they were allowed to, or there was more leniency given to them to express their anger.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think as a guy, to your point, I think anger is more accepted with a male versus a female.
Yeah.
I would say, cashing out some of the chips on a guy's side of the table. Anger is typically a telltale sign of depression in males. Women manifest depression differently. They show some of the stereotypical signs more so. And again, I think this comes into societal pressures too that have been in this country since probably the beginning, to almost 300 years now. And it's this thing of, I lost my train of thought. Males, females.
Males being depressed. I mean, I've seen it with males that are highly abused. Their anger is through the roof, how they express it. They're getting expelled, they're hitting people, they're hitting things, but it's linked again to the hurt of being abused. Yeah,
and males, when you can see a guy who's very angry, is understanding beneath that is, to your point earlier, the hurt, fear, or both. But we're not typically allowed to show that society-wise, which is part of my big passion working with male clients, is understanding how do we show emotion as guys? And how do we maintain our quote-unquote manhood, but also be willing to cry, be willing to share, be vulnerable, whether it's your wife, your girlfriend, or whoever, your friends, and
Yep.
whatever your situation. And understanding, like, it's actually stronger and more courageous to let out some tears or have some heartfelt feelings than it is to stomp around,
It is.
punch a wall, or walk over and punch your neighbor, or whatever the deal. Even though maybe hitting someone is quote unquote more accepted umbrella wise, it is hard for males, and it is. I would agree there's a double standard. I think a guy that's intense and fiery and can get, jacked up, it's like, wow, he's an alpha male. He's this. A woman does that, and there's a B word that also you add the word itch after that. And and that's typically how that goes.
Yep.
He's an alpha male, he's a go-getter, and she's a beep. And it's like, wow, wait a second. Maybe she's just an intense woman who's after it too. You think about sales community, sales jobs, very intense, dog eat dog world. Yeah. Think about UFC fighting.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of women, and it's just an interesting perspective. But yeah, I do think there's pressures on both sides. Again, males not really allowed to show the emotions of being soft because you don't want to be seen that way.
Yep.
Women, y'all have your own issues of you don't want to be seen. This kind of ties into the whole sex idea we talked about a few weeks ago. Man, seen as a player. Woman, seen as yes.
Yep. But I mean, and this is where I also feel bad for men though too, because they're taught at a young age you can't be vulnerable. You can't show those emotions. You can't process those emotions, which also means you can't heal. Like you are, as a male, being set up for failure in relationships. And then suddenly you get in a relationship with someone else, or so you get married, and this person's expecting you now to have these deep conversations and to be able to access these emotions and talk about them and process them with her.
Yeah.
You can't go there with her if you haven't gone there for yourself. But you've also been told for decades, and for all the men watching this, you guys have been told for decades that you can't go there. And now suddenly you're expected to because you're in a new relationship, and that's hard. That doesn't change overnight. And that's why therapy, or at least having someone you can talk to about this, is so vital. So you can actually learn how to process those emotions and learn that your voice does have merit. Your voice does have value.
I think that's important for women to understand is, the male ego, as much bravado as we have and, all that, being fair and straight up, it is fragile. If you're married, you want your wife to trust you and believe in you. And, it's that classic talk, like men want respect, women want love. And I don't think anything's wrong with that. But there's this element too, whereas men, you want to feel capable and that you're able to provide, protect, do whatever. And it's tough when maybe your wife has her own issues of trust. Maybe she was married prior and had not a cool experience. And that's tough things on the male side, to take in. Again, right, wrong, and different. There's certain roles that go on, and people agree, disagree on that, and not here to argue that. But it's just as the male mind goes, it tends to gravitate towards this provide, protect. But when I'm not trusted, or the wife says, I don't trust you to do this and this, we may get pissed off, but really what it is, man, that's a crap ton of hurt that just came. So there's something out there. And this is where we kind of have some fun. Man, our road through anger. I think I've seen people, and I'll be straight, there's some people older than me who even taught us, who I know are afraid of their anger. I say embrace it. I don't want to say I intentionally get my clients all full of piss and vinegar, but I do get angry.
Yep.
Because that brings us to a place of prime material to work through. Get angry, that helps you find a voice. Now, is that productive long term? No, I'm not suggesting you, because we talked about that earlier. Don't swing the pendulum
Yep.
the other way. I will tell you that growing up, I was probably afraid of my dad, so I shut down, but I would explode on others.
Mm-hmm.
I was very good verbal sparring, to the point where I was very quickly could be very damaging to other people, because I can read and discern things very quickly about people the minute I shook their hand. And if you wronged me, I knew about 3 or 4 things about you that you never mentioned that I could shred you with.
Yeah.
Obviously, going back to the beginning, this was not a way of maintaining healthy relationships, but this is what I had to work with. And it took me a while. I'm not going to lie. It was probably about 25, 26. I was like, well, dang, I can't keep doing this crap, because I had just got into a huge argument with someone. I said something stupid.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I can't keep doing this. I literally, for an entire year, when I got mad, I just stayed quiet. I didn't say nothing, because I hadn't figured out how to communicate yet.
Yeah.
But I figured this is better than what I was doing. So this is a step in the right direction. So for an entire year, I did that. If I got pissed off, I would just stare at you, wait till you were done, and walk away, because that was the best I could offer.
Yeah.
And very, very slowly, I began trying to figure out how to talk. And that's what we talk about, it being a learned thing. Caitlin, you talked about being married, and now your wife's like, hey, I want to talk. And you're like, oh, hell no.
Like, I don't know how to do that.
Man, it took me years to figure out, how do I share this? How do I work through
But it
this?
wasn't safe for you to share any of that growing up, though.
Hell no.
It wasn't like you were just trying to sit back, and that's what happens to a lot of men too. It's not like they're just trying to sit back and say, oh, I don't want to talk about my emotions. It's not safe for them to go there. Because if you do, you're either abused, you're taken advantage of, or you're bullied.
You're a punk. Yeah. And you get that all the time. And I think for me, engaging my anger was also realizing some of that intensity is just a genuine part of my personality. And that's okay.
Yep.
And it's understanding, how do I take this intense part of me, harness it, and engage it and appreciate it as part of me.
Yeah.
But still find ways to communicate that to you or whoever, and so that it's a welcoming moment versus a door in your face moment. And that was something I learned from Larry, is, he was the first person, I feel like, in my life. Dr. Shires, I went in his office, and I thought I had screwed up in class. Won't get into the whole story, but he told me, he goes, I had a problem with what you did. He goes, if anything, I would tell you to keep going. And he was like, and I forget exactly how I worded it, but he's the first person in my life that actually was like, no, I want you to actually keep doing more of that and do it this. But he gave me little tips to harness it. And he was the one who told me, like, make it a welcoming thing versus a door in the face thing. And I was like, but man, it was, so what is that? 27, 26. I don't know. It was probably a good 4 or 5 year process of figuring out how to be mad and intense. And I still don't do it all right. I mean, we're not going to sit here and bat 1,000. Do I do way better? Yes. Am I probably 8 out of 10 doing it better? Yeah, but there's still those 2 out of 10 that I'm like the guy from Inside Out, the red guy.
Yes.
And and then I come back, and this is what I tell people too. It's okay if you misfire. We're human beings. Ain't none of us walking this road perfect. I mean, lose that idea.
Yep.
Here's where you can also make a comeback, I say. Are you willing to come back? Whether I argued with Andrea or you or whoever, can I come back to you later and say, look, I was in a crappy spot.
Yep.
I apologize. I said this and this was really offhand, stupid, whatever the deal.
Yeah.
Own what you did. You can explain why. You don't have to. If they want to know, that's up to you. But own up to what you did. Realize it was a misfire. Have a conversation.
Yeah. And
grow from it. I was so afraid because I never was able to have a conversation with someone who was angry and have it be productive. So it took a while for me to be around Andrea to realize, oh, you can be mad. This actually works out better.
You mean we can talk about things?
You're kidding me. And it's just a process of time.
Yeah.
What was your road? You have an interesting road. I actually have a question for you.
Hang on. Yeah, go ahead.
You said earlier that you were more of an imploder.
Mm-hmm.
Now I've only known you about 3 years or so.
Yeah.
So obviously a short time.
Short time.
I have to say, I don't know if it's because of therapy you switched.
I don't know if that's good.
No, and I don't mean that you were like exploding, but I had to say saw you fired up a few times. And I remember in Greece when you stepped on the sea urchin and somebody there was trying to take a picture of things, and you were fired up, and you didn't do it immediately, but you went up to that person 15 minutes later and had whatever conversation. I don't know, I was in the water, but you went up to her and confronted her.
Well, private conversation. She didn't think I understood Spanish. So, but private, because it wasn't appropriate to be had in front of other people. And I didn't want to explode on her and bring an embarrassment or humiliation there. But I needed to also set a boundary and let her know that that wasn't okay. Yeah, I was more of an imploder. See, guys, therapy works. You can learn how to be somewhere in the middle. I never expressed my anger. It would stay bottled up for a long time until I would usually end up crying. My anger led to an eating disorder, so where I took it out on my own body. See, things happen. Like if you implode, it destroys your body. So mine turned into anorexia, where I would just stop eating, and then it turned into alcoholism. So it just spiraled until I finally learned that anger wasn't bad. I was one of the people that was terrified of seeing my anger, of dealing with it. I thought that having anger was not acceptable. I thought that it wasn't healthy to have anger. So there were many things that had happened in my past that I didn't know how to deal with because I didn't know how to become angry about it or even accept that anger. So for instance, for me, when I finally got angry and didn't run away, because usually the feeling of anger would be coming up and then I would feel it rising and then I would go drink or I would go restrict or go run 5 miles. I wouldn't actually sit with it and look at the hurt or the fear below it. I would turn to the bottle because that for me was killing me, but it was also safer than looking at what had happened and the hurt and the fear that was driving the anger.
So that's all to avoid.
Exactly.
That's interesting.
Completely to avoid. And not knowing also how to deal with it. So again, being taught, at least from my background, that anger and aggression are the same thing. So touching any of that, dealing with any of that, you didn't do it as a female. Versus understanding that there are times that if you want to protect yourself, there is that anger that comes, but you can protect yourself in a healthier way. Even though that's avoiding the situation, you can protect yourself in a healthier way than being very passive and just kind of swallowing it and saying, okay, well, I'm just not going to touch my anger or go there.
Huh.
Yeah. But yes, now I do know how to actually express my anger without exploding.
I just have to say I'm thrown off because I thought you were kind of, just a fiery person too. I mean, I saw it. Maybe
I was. As a kid, like my little brother was being bullied one day and I was in middle school. And so he was maybe.
Oh boy, the older sister thing coming.
So he was maybe 7. And this was the first time I think I had ever actually expressed my anger. I got in so much trouble. But he was 7 and some kid was chasing him around the park and would not leave him alone. And so I may have gotten in the kid's face and like grabbed his shirt and told him he didn't stop messing with my little brother. I would take care of him. But like I had his shirt collar pulled up and I pulled his face to mine. And my mom looks over and she's like, Kaylin.
Wow, you were like mafioso style. You're like, I will put you in a garbage truck.
My little brother was so sweet. You don't mess with him.
Wow.
But after that, just through the environment and multiple factors, I was, again, anger was not expressed. You just kind of pushed it down and you dealt with it. But you can see where, following my storyline that's different than Justin's, where the imploding happened, where the eating disorder did start. And then the addiction started. And then picking different relationships that were not healthy started. And it all came from just imploding. And so I finally got into therapy and started forming healthier relationships and healthier friendships, that I could actually sit with the anger and then sit with the hurt and the fear that was below it. And once I could actually go there, I found that the anger was starting to dissipate a lot, because I understood what was driving it. It didn't mean that there wasn't some of that anger of, wow, this actually happened. This is really, really messed up, and I'm pissed off right now. But it didn't ruin my whole year.
Sure.
Before, the anger would lead me into either I'm going to restrict, I'm going to go work out, I'm going to drink, I'm going to avoid it. I need to do something to avoid. And there was, again, you can hear it in my voice, like that panic, that desperation that's there.
Mm-hmm.
Versus, let's say, having a flashback. That anger coming of, wow, I can't believe that happened. Being able to recognize the hurt and the fear that's below it is why I feel so angry right now. Dealing with the hurt and the fear. And then being able to move along and realize that I don't have to live the rest of my life angry. I don't have to live the rest of my life afraid. I don't have to live the rest of my life kind of like waiting for that next hit. I can continue moving and continue living. But again, that was about a almost 5-year process. I was an avoider, guys. I used to tell Justin, he called me on this all the time, great at minimizing things. If like a problem was emerging, I'd be like, oh, it's like a little anthill. It's like, we're fine. No, it was like an erupting volcano. And I'd be over here like, no, it's a little anthill. We're good. Don't need to worry about it right now.
I'd be like, really? Yeah. So this concludes our journey through Wayne Dyer's book, Your Erroneous Zones. Next week, we start a new evolution in the show called Why Therapy?
Yes.
And that's how we're going to kind of take this show on probably for the rest of the year.
Yep.
Is a combination of our journey through therapy, our journey as therapy-tazers. What happens in therapy? I think people have a lot of questions like, well, what am I going to be doing? Not that there's some linear process to this. So if you're looking for that, it's not that way. But we're going to probably talk about the first episode, why therapy?
Mm-hmm.
And then the next 4 episodes will be about attachment, how you relate to others. Adam Young has a couple cool podcasts on that, by the way.
That will be good.
But there's a process of going through your attachment, because I think that's because as therapists, I'm waiting to see how you react to me to bring that in the room.
Yep.
But that's for next week. So this is us signing off, episode 7 of the Justin and
Caitlin Show. Woo!
Thank you for our 1 million subscribers and followers. Hopefully one day. We'll see y'all next week.
Bye.